Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the introduction and thanks for inviting me. Today, I will talk about my current research interest. And as Bülent just said, I am an archaeologist specialized on the history of urbanism. My major fields of research are urbanization, interregional contacts, and the expansion of ideologies with a particular focus on the 3rd millennium BC. And the 3rd millennium BC is also the time period I am going to talk about today. The title of this presentation is Herders as Actors of the International Spirit of the 3rd millennium BC. But I will not mention all the herders and all the pastoralists' lifestyles. I will focus mainly on Central Asia and Eurasian steppes today. To make a general introduction first, maybe we should start with the question, what is the international spirit mentioned in the text? It is a term, the international spirit is a term introduced by Colin Renfrew in the 70s to describe the events that took place during the 3rd millennium BC in a vast area from Central Asia, including Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Anatolia. So the most characteristic feature of this period was a systematic long-distance trade network with the main center in Mesopotamia. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the main center of this whole network was southern Mesopotamia, here in this region. The 3rd millennium in southern Mesopotamia can be divided in these periods: the early dynastic Akkadian Empire and the 3rd dynasty of Ur. So mainly the Sumerians and Akkadians. The first cities, it is an important period because the first cities were established during this period, and they are characterized by large populations, centralized administration, social hierarchy, monumental buildings, and economic and administrative practices. Also, the invention of writing has started during the 3rd millennium BC, and the southern Mesopotamians also used seals for a secure closing of documents and goods. Here on the picture, you can see the ancient city of Ur, the largest city of that period in modern Iraq, in southern Iraq. And it had the city had a huge population of about 40,000 people at the beginning of the 3rd millennium BC. But it was not the only city, of course. There were some other city-states. These were independent city-states. There was no empire yet. These were independent city-states, and maybe the most characteristic feature is that they were in a constant power struggle. So these were rival cities, and the rulers and elites in these cities were in a constant search for new ways to define their social position, to prove their power. And one of these methods, one of these ways was luxury items imported from distant regions. And the southern Mesopotamia is actually a region without any raw materials. There is nothing. They don't have stone. They don't have wood. They don't have metals. So the life in southern Mesopotamia has always been dependent on trade with distant regions. But during the 3rd millennium BC, there appeared a new need, which became vital in an ideological sense. It was the need for luxury. So exotic materials were important from different regions, and it became a major part of the newly defined elite identity in southern Mesopotamia, which required a continuous flow of exotic materials to underline the social differences. And here on the slide, you can see some of those imports according to written sources. And these were not only, as you can see, not only vital raw materials like metals or stone, but also exotic woods, even animals, textiles, ivory, many different things. Also plants were imported from different regions to southern Mesopotamia. Probably the most striking example of this situation in southern Mesopotamia is the royal cemetery at Ur. Here on the picture, you can see only some of the objects which were found there in the cemetery, and all the materials which were used on these objects for the production of these objects were coming from different regions. You can see gold, silver, lapis lazuli, shell, limestone, bitumen, etc. And also here the famous tomb of Queen Puabi from the royal cemetery at Ur. Again, all the materials you can see here are coming from different regions. Yeah. So as you can see, the non-essential materials, actually non-essential materials such as precious items, jewels, etc., had the widest distribution among all these trade goods, and this demonstrates that the network was mainly established to respond to the luxury demands of the elites in southern Mesopotamia. We know from Anatolia that the network extended also to the Aegean. Sorry. So yeah. Anyway, so this was actually these objects were actually the reason why this topic has sparked my interest in the first place. Because since almost 10 years, I am working on the Western expansion of the networks during the third millennium BC, the international spirit, as Renfrew called it. And in Anatolia, especially during the second half of the millennium, regular caravan routes were established in the course of the millennium to connect the region with the urban centers of southern Mesopotamia. And apparently, the rising need for trade goods made possible a division of labor here in this region in Anatolia, and accordingly social division. And the earliest cities in this region were established as a result of this process, whose driving force was the trade with distant regions. So the city of Troy on the Aegean coast of Anatolia is particularly interesting in this regard. Here on the picture, you can see some objects from Troy, providing the evidence for the large-scale expansion of the interregional contacts. On the left side, you can see an axe, a ceremonial axe made of lapis lazuli, and also the beads you can see are important because lapis lazuli is a material, a semi-precious material, which is only to be found in Afghanistan and Tajikistan, and also the other beads have stylistic parallels in different regions. Here you can see it, pictures from Afghanistan. This is the only source. Afghanistan and Tajikistan are the only source of lapis lazuli in the whole world. So they were imported to Troy, from Afghanistan to Troy during the third millennium BC. It was a precious item, not only in Anatolia, but also in other regions. It was highly demanded trading good in Iran, the Indus, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Anatolia. And there were even centers for the distribution of these raw materials. Ebla in Syria, there's a palace called the Palace G in Ebla, and the archaeologists have found 22 kilograms of lapis lazuli here in this palace, which is a huge amount. And so we can understand that some centers were in a ruling position in the trade network, and Ebla in this case was the ruling center for lapis lazuli, obviously. And yes, this is another example, the spiral beads. They also have found their ways into different regions, not only Anatolia, but also Mesopotamia and Central Asia. You can see how you can see the large scale of the spread of these beads. The origin of these beads is actually unknown. We don't know where it was first made, but it was made locally in different settlements during the 3rd millennium BC. But the expansion of this style is so striking that we should take it into consideration. And also this one, another object or group of objects from Troy, the flat beads with tubular mid-ribs. We can find them in Troy, in Western Anatolia, in Mesopotamia, around the Caspian Sea, and also in Central Asia. So this was actually the reason why it has sparked my interest. And what I want to emphasize is after focusing so many years on the Western part of this network, I realized recently that it's not enough to concentrate on only one region. One region is not enough, one single region is not enough to understand the whole concept of this international spirit. And that's why I'm trying to understand the Eastern connections recently. But I'm quite new in the field, so I'm sure that there are some archaeologists among you who know better, who know these areas better. And yes, so this is the network, the expansion of the international spirit. And here you can see southern Mesopotamia as the core region of this network. In the east, there is Iran, Southern Asia, and Central Asia. Sorry. These places have created their own way of urbanism during the late 3rd millennium BC, almost at the same time as in Anatolia. The process was probably similar. There was a rising level of trade, and accordingly a division of labor, social stratification, and also administrative practices such as sealing and weighing were to be found in Central Asia and Southern Asia. And I love this sentence by Tulsi and Lambert-Karlowski. The civilization appears to have left no vacuum in the space between the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia. However, we know that they were in contact. We know that they were the southern Mesopotamians were importing trade goods from distant regions. But when we look at the textual evidence from Mesopotamia, it looks like they don't know much about these regions. Actually, they know only almost nothing about these regions. They mentioned some countries, some cities like Dilmun, Magan, Marhashi, Aratta, and Meluha. But when you look at the descriptions, it is always quite unspecific. For example, the city of Aratta is described as being behind 7 mountains. So it could have been anywhere in Asia. So apparently they were not in direct contact with those people in the East. But then, of course, there comes the question, how did they know about the existence of those trade goods in the first place? How were they able to import them to their cities? Of course, there were always groups traveling in these regions, and trade was, of course, not a new invention. But during the 3rd millennium BC, something has changed. During this time, we can observe a rapid spread of innovations originating from the Eurasian steppe. On the map, you can see the Eurasian steppe belt in the upper parts of the map. And here in the southern parts, this is Central Asia. surrounded by by different mountain ranges, and also having deserts like Karakum and Kızılkum. Yes, during this period, many different, not only trade routes, but also ideas have traveled from these regions to the south, to the civilized regions of the Near East and South Asia. First of all, new transportation methods have been developed already a few centuries before the 3rd millennium BC. And we know that these new transportation methods were in use in all these mentioned regions by at least by the mid-3rd millennium BC. So the most important innovation, one of the most important innovations was the wheeled vehicles and the use of domestic animals for pack transport made possible a much faster movement between distant regions with a much larger transportation capacity for heavier loads. And they also became this new invention became a status symbols in many different regions of this period. As you can see, for example, here on the standard from the same royal cemetery at Ur. Here, I hope you can see them. Here, the first one, and here there are 4 other chariots carried by animals. And this was a status item. This was a prestigious item, obviously. And here you can understand the importance of this new innovation, what kind of a powerful impact it had on the people living in different regions. And there were also some other innovations which have been kind of a turning point in history. And these were, for example, bronze smelting techniques and the domestication of horses. The nature of this rapid expansion of steppe innovations still needs some clear explanation, but the number of excavated sites in both Central Asia and the Eurasian steppe is actually still quite low. So we don't know much about these regions. There are only a few settlements or only a few sites which have been excavated in the past years, in the past 50, 60 years, but the numbers are still not enough. And accordingly, we should build our theories on these selected sites. But there is an interesting and attractive theory since a few years, and I must admit that I believe it. It was first suggested by Gregory Possehl and later advanced by Michael Frachetti from Washington. According to this theory, the first steps of the Silk Road were taken during the 3rd millennium BC. As you know, the Silk Road is actually a much later phenomenon from about the 2nd century BC. And the term Silk Road defines only a specific period of interaction between China and the cultures of the Near East. But current research suggests that the first connections in these regions were already established during the 3rd millennium BC. The later Silk Road, as you know, was not a single road. Sorry. It was a web of steppes, mountains, and deserts and oases, consequently connecting distant societies to each other. These were all difficult ecologic niches. So when you think about the deserts and steppes and mountains, etc., and they have witnessed many generations of herders moving with their animals up and down the mountains for millennia, and they can be traced back to at least to the mid-3rd millennium BC. So, but the question is, how did they do it? How could they establish these roads, these routes? On the map, it the same map, you can see the Eurasian steppe and the Central Asia, surrounded by mountain ranges in the south and east. The region is a mixture of different ecologic niches. There are rain-fed mountains, arid deserts, and grasslands. The deserts, Karakum and Kızılkum, are characterized by extreme aridity, and in some periods they go without rainfall for 10 years, or up to 10 years. The mountain zones, on the other hand, experience drastic changes in temperature and precipitation. These extreme conditions make the mountains difficult to exploit for subsistence, and the region can be deadly for maladapted inhabitants. It certainly demanded specialized strategies, but even then, even if the people have established those specialized strategies, the regions wouldn't support large populations. So here in the northern part of this area, we don't know any cities or any settlements we would call cities. Only encampments used in winter or summer, so for seasonal use. And yeah, nomadic pastoralism was the solution the people, the locals have established here to face these difficult conditions. And it was established, the nomadic pastoralism was established during the mid-3rd millennium BC. It was an economic and social strategy where people provided for their economic needs primarily through intensive management of domestic herds and by relying on seasonal migrations to support the survival of their societies. Here you can see the southern mountain zones, Kopet-Dağ, Hindu-Kush, and the Pamir Mountains. These are quite rich in natural resources like stones and metals. But also here in the eastern part, in Tian Shan and Chungar Mountains, these places are also rich in resources. They have different plants and different seasons, and so people could live here with their animals. But when we go, when we go to the southern parts of this region, we see the earliest urban centers here of this region, and it was almost at the same time as the first cities in Anatolia, so around the mid-3rd millennium BC, or the second half of the 3rd millennium BC. We call this phenomenon the Paktria Marjana archaeological complex, and also known as the Oxus civilization, or BMAC, as you can see here. And this civilization is characterized by its urban centers, large urban centers with fortifications, and the settlements were dependent on irrigation culture, domestic animal husbandry, and the importation of exotic raw materials. But the most striking fact about the BMAC is that it was a production center of different trade goods. The region itself, here you can see the core area, the region itself didn't have any raw materials. Everything had to be imported from somewhere else. And then they turned the raw materials into products, and they sold them back. They exported them back to those areas, to those regions where they have first imported the raw materials. So it is actually, I don't want to change the topic, but it reminds me of the current situation of clothing, the modern clothing we have. The textile is produced in Turkey, but we sell it to the, let's say, to the United States, and it turns into into a labeled product, let's say Nike, and it comes back to Turkey, and we buy it for it becomes more expensive. So it reminds me of the same situation, the Paktria Marjana archaeological complex. The most famous settlement of the complex BMAC is Altıntepe in Turkmenistan. It was a fortified settlement in the east of Kopetta, here in the east of Kopetta, like 5 or 6 kilometers away from the first foothills of the mountain, and it had a large, a massive mud brick temple, which looks actually quite similar to the cult centers, to the temples in Mesopotamia, because not only the building itself, but also the wealth of the city was concentrated in this building, and it is a characteristic feature of Mesopotamian cities, southern Mesopotamian cities at that time. So yeah, some other objects from Altıntepe. These were all locally made, but the raw materials, all of the raw materials are coming from distant regions. Here you can see a bull made of gold, silver, and turquoise, and here 2 seated female figurines made of terracotta. And the other famous settlement of the complex of BMAC is Gonurtepe, also in Turkmenistan. And it was also a fortified settlement, a large fortified settlement, and some products. So as you can see, they have produced completely different things with different materials coming from distant regions. Yeah, so the craft industry of the Paktria Marjana archaeological complex depended on metal and stone sources in the mountains, obviously, and it should have been the pastoralist societies, the transhuman pastoralist societies, who acted as middlemen, as brokers, if you want. And in this regard, the mobile pastoralists directly contributed to the success of urban settlements, not only in Central Asia, but also in the Near East and Southern Asia. Here you can see some other objects from Gonurtepe. This is a seal. This is an interesting object, actually, and I have some problems understanding it. They have many seals like that in different BMAC settlements. These all look like that. So yeah, as a Near Eastern archaeologist, I know cylinder seals and stamp seals from Mesopotamia and Anatolia, but they always have the, let's say, the beautiful part is underneath. So you are sealing it. You are sealing the beautiful part, the impressive part on the object. But here in this case, please look at the knob. The knob is on the front side, and the back looks like this. So I have some problems in understanding these. I cannot imagine what they have sealed with these objects, or if they were seals at all, or something else. Maybe we don't know the function yet. And yeah, okay. Yeah, so we can observe the connections with pastoralist groups in southern parts of Central Asia, but we can observe it also in some parts of the regions the pastoralists, transhuman pastoralists were living. Begash on the Chinese border, I don't know if you can see it. I hope you can see it. Yeah, it's here. Begash on the Chinese border of offers the best information so far. It has been excavated. It is being excavated since a few years, and it was probably a winter residence of transhuman pastoralists. But interestingly, archaeologists have found the earliest evidence of domesticated grains in Central Asia, in whole Central Asia, here in this region, and they date back to the mid-3rd millennium BC. There is also another excavation, another small-scale encampment, quite close to Begash. It's Tasbas, also in Kazakhstan. Also here, the archaeologists could find domesticated grains, but the grain was not produced here. It came from southern parts of Asia. But the interesting part is, at almost the same time, a few centuries later, we have the first evidence of domesticated grains in China. And the seeds, let me show you the map again. The seeds we can find in early China are quite similar to these seeds from Begash, which means from southern Asia. Let's say the Indus, around the Indus Valley. So the nature of the contents is not completely clear yet, but it is possible that transhuman societies emerging in the second half of the 3rd millennium BC have made the first steps of the later Silk Road. And here, a quote of Frachetti and Roos. Frachetti suggests a non-uniform complexity among the pastoralists, and according to him, mobile pastoralists were not fringe communities. They were essential to the fabric of Bronze Age urban prosperity and helped drive the system of cultural, economic, and political interaction. So these are the references I have used, and thank you for your attention.